They were supposed to miss that flight. God tried to stop them over and over again. They ignored every sign, except the last one, and by then, it was already too late. That morning, Mira woke up very early, around 5 a.m., which was unusual for her. Shortly after, her phone rang. It was her grandma. Grandma said she had a terrible dream, one where Mira and her twin brother were in an accident. She begged them not to travel for the time being. Mind you, Mira hadn't mentioned anything about traveling to her grandma, so she had no idea their flight back from school was at 11:15 a.m. that same morning. "Grandma, you worry too much," Mira said, thinking it was just one of her usual dreams and concerns, unaware that today was different. Mira and Jace were twins. It was the first Monday of summer break. After 9 long months in school, they were finally going home, along with 5 of their classmates, squeezed into a black van racing toward LAX. Everyone was excited. Everyone except her. Halfway to the airport, Mira suddenly sat forward. "Stop the car," she said, her voice sharp. Jace looked up from his phone. "What?" The Uber driver flicked his eyes to the mirror. "Everything okay?" Myra's hand trembled. "My Bible, the pink one. I left it." Jace rolled his eyes. "You're kidding. We don't have time." "Just 3 minutes," she whispered. "I'll run up and get it." Jace slapped his hand on the seat. "Mira, seriously?" She stared at her brother, her jaw clenched. "Dad wrote something inside that Bible. I need to get it. It wouldn't even take more than 3 minutes to just grab it. We're not missing this flight." Jace repeated. Mira didn't answer. All she knew was that her body was screaming to turn around, and she didn't. Neither of them did. Back in Georgia, David dropped his spoon in the sink. His heart skipped once. Then again, he gripped the edge of the counter. "Elaine," he called out. "Can you come here?" "I'm in the middle of the stew," she shouted back. "I need us to pray for the twins." She stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Honey, they'll be fine. Go ahead and pray if you want to. I just need to get their favorite meal ready before they get home." Unaware that the meal she was preparing would never be eaten. As they approached the airport gate, Mira spotted an old woman, hunched over, dragging a heavy suitcase behind her with shaky hands. She looked exhausted, struggling to walk, her headscarf slipping off, barely managing to stay upright. "Stop the car," Mira said sharply, leaning forward. Jace blinked. "Again. Please. Stop." The driver slowed down. "What is wrong with you?" Jace snapped. "We're already late." The other students groaned. "There's no space for her here," one of them muttered. "She won't even fit," another added. "Mira, can we just get to our flight in peace?" But Mira kept her eyes on the woman. "She could be any of our grandmothers," she said quietly. From the back seat, Sham scoffed. "Yeah, well, she can never be mine." The car pulled to the side of the road anyway, but it was no use. The trunk was full. The seats were taken. The woman's luggage was too heavy, and her steps were too slow. The driver shook his head. "She can't ride with us." "I will help her," Mira said suddenly. Everyone turned. "What?" Jace's voice rose. "No, you're not." "Mira, go ahead," she said. "I'll catch up. You don't even know her. She's alone. She's a stranger. She needs help." Jace looked at her. His twin. Stubborn, soft-hearted Mira, always slowing down for things that didn't make sense. He rubbed his forehead, furious, but he couldn't leave her. "Fine," he muttered. "But don't expect me to talk to you after this." The rest of the students groaned again. "Are we seriously doing this?" Sham snapped. "You all can go," Mira said. "We'll find another way." The car drove off, leaving a small cloud of dust behind. Mira turned to the old woman and reached for her suitcase. Back in Georgia, the rice had stopped boiling, but David didn't notice. He was already on his knees in the living room, hands trembling, Bible open on the couch beside him. He couldn't explain the pressure in his chest, the urgency in his spirit, but he knew it wasn't ordinary. He shut his eyes and began to pray. "Lord, I don't know where they are right now, but you do." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, and then he stood, not just physically, but in authority. He picked up the Bible and raised it slightly, whispering the verse that came alive in his chest. "I and the children whom the Lord has given me are for signs and for wonders." Isaiah 8 verse 18. He took a breath, then declared, "God, you made me the head and the priest over this family. I stand in that position now, not just as a man, but as a father. And I declare, no evil will touch my children." He walked to the window, voice rising. Whatever is waiting for them, I scatter it in the name of Jesus. No weapon formed against them will prosper. No sudden terror, no strange attack, no midair confusion. He placed his hand over his chest. Mira is a covenant child. Jace is a covenant child. They carry oil. They carry purpose. I call them back under your wings, Lord. He stood there, speaking, praying, crying, not knowing what was happening across the country, not knowing heaven was listening. And time was running out. Mira reached down and grabbed the woman's suitcase. It was heavier than it looked. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked gently. The woman smiled, her face lined but warm. "I'm all right, my dear. Just not as fast as I used to be." Jace stood a few feet away, arms folded, visibly irritated. "You shouldn't be carrying all that alone." The woman nodded. "Tell that to my son-in-law. He dropped me right here and drove off like he had a fire to put out." "He left you on the road?" Mira asked, shocked. "He said he got an emergency work call. Told me I'd be fine on my own. Said I'd figure it out." The woman chuckled softly. "I guess I did." "Where are you going?" Jace asked, narrowing his eyes. "Georgia," she said. "I live in Marietta with my daughter." Mira looked at Jace, startled. That's where we're headed to." The woman smiled wider. "Delta Flight 375. Jace straightened. "That's our flight." The three stood there for a moment, the wind brushing lightly through the trees, like even the air was watching them. "Well then," the woman said, gripping Myra's arm lightly. "I suppose we were meant to meet after all." Jace didn't say anything. They didn't know it yet. But this single act of kindness, and this woman, would play a role in their lives far bigger than they could possibly imagine. By the time they reached the airport, the terminal clock read 10:41 a.m. Their flight was scheduled for 10:45. "Run," Mira shouted, grabbing her backpack tighter. She dashed forward, weaving through the crowd. Jace stayed behind, helping the old woman as she struggled to lift one leg after the other. They reached the gate just seconds apart. Mira got there first, panting. "Delta 375, she said quickly. "We're here. 3 of us. Twins and an elderly woman. Please." The gate attendant shook her head. "I'm sorry. Boarding is closed." "What?" Mira gasped. "But we're right here. You were supposed to be at the gate 15 minutes ago." "We had to help her," Mira said, pointing back at the old woman. She couldn't walk fast. The attendant looked behind Mira. Jace had just caught up, holding the woman's hand like a reluctant grandson. The woman said nothing, just smiled gently and looked down. "I'm really sorry," the attendant repeated. "The plane's full. Doors are shut." Myra's eyes filled with tears. Please, we've had a long morning. Just ask the pilot. Please." The woman at the gate hesitated, looked down at her screen, looked back at them. "Wait here," she said finally, and disappeared behind the door. For a moment, the world was quiet. Even Jace didn't complain. Even the old woman stood still. 2 minutes passed. Then the door opened again. "Come on," the attendant said quickly. Mira let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They grabbed their bags and rushed forward. To them it felt like mercy. But not everything that opens is a door from God. They stepped onto the plane, Mira still catching her breath as she glanced at the boarding pass in her hand. "Row 19, she said, pointing ahead. "Seats A, B, and C. That's us." Their friends were already seated, Sham, Lola, and the others. Mira and Jace were supposed to sit right beside them. "Come on," she said, tugging Jace's arm. But when they got there, Jace froze. "Someone's in my seat," he said. A tall boy, another student, someone they vaguely recognized from another school dorm, sat slouched in seat 19B, headphones in. Mira stepped forward politely. "Hey, sorry. I think that's our seat. We were just a little late boarding." The boy glanced at her, then at Jace. "Yeah, I figured you guys weren't coming." He didn't move. "I had a middle seat at the back," he added, shrugging. "Didn't feel like squeezing in there, so I moved up." Jace's jaw tightened. "Okay, but that's not how this works. That's my seat." The guy looked back at him. "Well, I'm here now." The students in nearby rows turned to watch. Jace took a step forward. "Get up." "Jace," Mira said quickly, placing a hand on his arm. "It's not worth it." "He took my seat." "It doesn't matter." "I'm not going to the back, Mira." "There's a seat with the woman," she said softly. "Let's just sit with her." Jace exhaled sharply, angry, but something in Myra's voice stopped him. Without another word, they turned and walked toward the rear. The last row, row 31. Seats E and F, right beside the old woman. She smiled when they approached. "Look at that. I saved a space for you," Jace muttered under his breath as he sat. Mira didn't speak. She just buckled her seatbelt and looked down at her empty hands, still wishing she'd gone back for that Bible. They didn't know it yet, but what felt like a small inconvenience was the very thing that would decide who lived and who didn't. The plane took off like any other. Smooth. Jace sat stiffly, arms folded across his chest, eyes closed. Mira leaned against the window beside the old woman, quietly watching the clouds roll by beneath them. For the first 20 minutes, nothing felt strange. A flight attendant came around with water. Someone in front of them was watching a movie. Children laughed softly a few rows ahead. The captain's voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. Please keep your seatbelts fastened as we expect a bit of turbulence." Mira glanced over at Jace. He didn't open his eyes, but she could tell he was still annoyed about the seat mix-up. She sighed and looked forward again. Minute 21. A small bump. Just enough to jostle a few tray tables. Nothing major. Someone laughed nervously. A baby cried. The old woman reached over and gently patted Myra's hand. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "Sometimes the wind just wants to remind us who's in charge." Minute 22. It happened all at once. The lights flickered. The cabin dropped. Not a gentle drop. A violent lurch that sent hearts flying into throats. Screams erupted from the front. Overhead bins burst open. A laptop flew down the aisle. Someone's water bottle bounced under the seats. "Is this normal?" Jace shouted, grabbing the seat in front of him. The plane dropped again, harder this time. The oxygen masks fell. One by one. Gasps filled the air. Prayers. Cries. People fumbling to reach for anything they could hold. The flight attendants tried to speak, but no one could hear them over the chaos. The aircraft shook violently, as if being pulled in two different directions. Someone screamed, "We're going down." Another shouted, "Jesus." The old woman was still calm. Mira glanced at her, shocked. Her eyes were closed, mouth moving, praying. "Mira," Jace yelled, reaching across the aisle. The lights shut off. A sound like metal tearing screamed through the cabin. Then, silence. That was all anyone could remember. Back in Georgia, the Abby Whitten home was already set. The table was laid. Elaine had just finished arranging the juice cups. The rice, chicken, and plantains were still warm. James was sitting in the study room, flipping slowly through his Bible, not really reading, just holding it, letting it rest on his lap. He couldn't shake the strange heaviness in his chest. He'd been feeling it all morning. Elaine walked in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. Her face lit up the moment she saw him. "Everything's ready," she said, smiling. "I'm about to set the trays. Can you help me carry the drinks?" James didn't move right away. "I will," he said softly, eyes still on the Bible. "Just give me one more minute." Elaine nodded and turned to walk out, then stopped. The television in the study was still on, the volume low. A breaking news banner suddenly rolled across the screen. "Breaking news. Delta Flight 375 from Los Angeles to Atlanta has crashed." James looked up. Elaine froze. They both turned toward the screen. Reports confirmed the plane lost contact with air traffic control approximately 22 minutes after takeoff. First responders are on site. So far, authorities have not confirmed if there are any survivors. The screen showed it all: fire trucks, smoke, emergency responders running, bodies being lifted out, people shouting into walkie-talkies. Elaine dropped the tray in her hand. Plates shattered on the tiled floor. Then she dropped too. Right there in the middle of the room, she collapsed, her knees hitting the floor before James could reach her. "Elaine!" he shouted, rushing toward her. She was trembling, her face pale. That's their flight. James, that's their flight." He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just looked at the screen, still hoping, praying that somehow this wasn't real. But it was. The crash site was chaos. Fire trucks, flashing red and white. Helicopters circling above. Dozens of rescue workers running across scorched earth. Boots sinking into mud and ash as they yelled through radios and thick smoke. The air smelled like fuel, metal, and something worse. Parts of the plane were scattered like broken toys. Seats ripped out. Wires hanging from blackened trees. Luggage flung wide open. Burned clothes stuck to branches like ghosts. One of the wings was still on fire. Bodies were everywhere. Some still in their seats, crushed beyond recognition. others halfway outside, as if they'd been thrown through the sky. There were no screams, no cries, no hands reaching out, only the shouting of responders, calling numbers over radios, moving in all directions, and still finding nothing. A young rescue worker stepped back from the wreckage, pulled off his helmet, and looked down. "They're all gone," he whispered. There's no one alive." Another responder walked past, carrying a piece of a child's sneaker. Someone else pulled a charred Bible from beneath a twisted seatbelt. They were covering bodies now, lining them up quietly. Zip, zip, zip. Still counting, still hoping, still finding only silence. The news cameras stayed at a distance. Reporters held their microphones with trembling hands. Families across the country stared at their screens, praying to hear words no one could say. There were no survivors. At least, that's what it looked like. Elaine hadn't said a full sentence since the news broke. She'd been admitted to the hospital after collapsing at home, her body unable to hold up under the weight of what she'd heard. The doctors called it shock. She lay there now, pale and still, and four running into her arm. Eyes swollen, voice barely above a whisper. She kept mumbling the same thing over and over. "Not my babies. God, not my babies." James sat beside her bed, still in the same clothes he wore when they got the call. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. He looked like a ghost of himself. The TV in the hospital waiting room had replayed the footage over and over. He wasn't acting like it didn't hurt. It hurt more than anything ever had. But he kept doing the only thing he knew how to do: pray. He held Elaine's hand and whispered again, "I and the children the Lord has given me are for signs and wonders. They will not be counted among the dead. They will live and not die, and declare the works of the Lord." He said it through tears, through swollen eyes, through a voice that cracked halfway through every sentence. But he said it, over and over. Then, 2 days later, the rescue team set out to clear what was left of the crash site. The main wreckage had been handled, bodies counted, flight manifest confirmed. The world had moved on. Everyone on Delta Flight 375 was presumed dead. But as they cleared through a deeper part of the forest, they found something strange. A large section of the plane, buried under mud, branches, and metal, unburnt, unsearched. No one had seen it before. They paused, called for backup, cut through the wreckage. Then they heard it. A sound, a cough, then another. "Hold on, someone's in here." They dug fast, tore through seats, lifted metal, and then they saw her. Mira, barely conscious, covered in dirt, eyes fluttering. Hey, stay with me," the rescuer said, kneeling beside her. Mira moved her lips. The words were faint. "He told me not to move." "Who?" "A man in white," he sang, "and I slept." They found 3 others trapped with her. Jace, the old woman, and another boy, all alive. James was still sitting at Elaine's bedside when his phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at it for a second. Something in his chest shifted. He picked up. "Mr. Abby Witten?" "Yes. This is Officer Daniel Kearns with the search and recovery team on Delta Flight 375. I need you to stay calm." James sat up straight. His whole body went still. "There's been a new development," the voice continued. "A section of the plane was just recovered this morning. It wasn't part of the main wreckage. It was found deep in the forest, buried." James couldn't speak. We found 4 survivors inside that section." Silence. "We have reason to believe 2 of them are your children." James stood. "What did you say?" "They're alive, sir. Mira and Jace are alive. They're on their way to the hospital now." James dropped the phone. "James." Elaine stirred in her bed, eyes wide, suddenly alert. He rushed to her, eyes full of tears. "They're alive," he whispered, barely able to get it out. "Elaine, Mira and Jace, they're alive." She broke. The sob came from somewhere deep inside her chest. She sat up, clinging to him like breath. God had not lied, and the prayers had not been in vain. They had been counted out, but God had counted them differently. But unfortunately, Grandpa died in the ICU 5 days after. You can't tell me that God isn't mindful of his own. I would rather swallow Mount Everest than believe that. Why am I telling you this? Because you've had moments like this too, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Maybe it was a dream, a voice, or just a feeling. And in that moment, deep down, you knew. This could only be God. These are the moments you must hold on to when your faith begins to waver, when it feels like God is silent or distant. These are the memories you pull up as evidence that you have a Father who sees you. The flaw of being human is that we forget too quickly. That small thing that saved your life, that gentle nudge that made you choose wisely. Don't discard those moments. They matter. On the days when your strength feels small, remind yourself of those times. They don't have to make sense to anyone else. They are yours, your proof, your personal reminders that God has always been mindful of you. So remember, because sometimes the encouragement you're searching for is already hidden in what God has done for you before.